conversion, sorry.
Thank you. I'll try and keep it brief, partly because I'm going to get very hot. But also, I hope we have time for questions as well, so that would be important from my point of view. My background is in peace research, trade union, and labour movement, academia, specifically arms conversion in the 70s and 80s. And I want to speak briefly about two examples of that, just to give you a flavour of what can be achieved if people come together through the trade union movement to support disarmament and alternatives to military work. And then I'll speak briefly about Teledyne as far as I'm aware, in terms of the structure of the company and what that tells us about the possibilities of this company diversifying from military to civil work. The first example is the Lucas Aerospace example. Some of you might know it. It's the Lucas Aerospace Combine that came together in 1975, 76. And the company was a big aerospace defence manufacturer. The workers were faced with a redundancy program, and they came back with the response was, well, rather than just accept the redundancy, we'll come up with an alternative plan to military work. And so they discussed it with the rest of the trade unions in various plants around the country. I think there were about 12 or 13. And they came together collectively with a combined plan, which looked at alternatives in the medical industry, in transportation, environmental technologies. For example, they designed a kidney dialysis machine, which was using the skills of the workforce and the technological capabilities of the workforce for what they described as socially useful production. So basically the idea was, why, if we can spend as a government on priorities for armaments, can't we spend on the priorities for social usefulness instead? And it became one of the sort of landmark achievements, I think, of the trade union movement. And I think Leslie's right to say we're not seeing enough of that nowadays. But at the same time, you have to contrast, I think, what's happening at the national level with the Labour government, which seems to be more and more obsessed with rearmament rather than disarmament, and the grassroots trade union movement, which is still very strong and progressive. I mean, it's been involved through branch levels in all sorts of campaigns to support the Palestinian people. And I don't think we should forget that, because it's through the grassroots, I think, that trade unions can make a difference. And the other example is the one I worked on, which was when I was at the Department of Peace Studies. And I worked with trade unionists in Barry-in-Furness on a report that was called Oceans of Work. And that looked at alternatives to the Trident nuclear submarine program, which was the big program at the time for the replacement of the Polaris submarines with the next generation of nuclear weapons. And we argued that the same principles as the Lucas Aerospace Shop Stewards Combined Plan could be applied to the marine technologies of the company, the shipyard in Barrow. So we came up with a range of alternatives. But the most important point we were trying to make at that time was that there were real possibilities, if there was a Marine Technology Research and Development Centre in Barrow, for developing the next generation of wave and wind power machinery. And we could have had an indigenous manufacturing capacity based in places like Barrow as a replacement for the Trident submarine program. Now, we were laughed out of court by a lot of people at the time because, you know, the idea of wind power was still a very exotic alternative to coal and oil and gas. But I think we proved over the time that actually what we were saying was actually very important in terms of the possibilities of companies like BA Systems, which own the submarine shipyard. So that's the sort of context in which I was operating in the sort of 80s and 90s. And there were many other examples of projects like that, where there were arms factories. Coventry was another example, Birmingham, some in London. And the trade union movement was trying to get what was absolutely essential, which was a national conversion programme and policy, which never really happened. That was the tragedy with it. There were lots of really good ideas around, but both the Conservative and the Labour governments really didn't push it through as a priority and as part of their agendas. But it's still there, and it's still acknowledged as an example of what can be achieved through the trade union movement when it comes to disarmament. Now, very briefly, I'll talk about Teledyne, because the companies I've researched were the big companies like British Aerospace Systems, BAE Systems now, and Lockheed and Grumman, the big American corporations. 90–95% of their turnover will be in defence, and most of it will be through the Ministry of Defence or the United States Department of Defence. So that's the sort of corporate structure that I was used to. And it's still important, but companies like Teledyne are interesting because I describe them as second-tier companies. They're not up there in terms of the volume of production and the sort of specialist platforms that we think of in terms of arms manufacturing. But they have a range of dual-use technologies, in avionics, thermal imaging, those sorts of things. I think you mentioned these things. So what's interesting, if you look at their annual statements, and I have looked at some of their annual statements, they'll try and produce examples of civil alternatives because they're actually involved with them, and they tend to play down the military aspects of their work. But they are important. I mean, one of the classic examples was the long-range thermal observation for deep space, and they have a picture, which is an extraordinary picture, of the birth of a new star using their technology. Now, I can't think of anything more sort of like contrasting in terms of the possible application of a technology between identifying the origins of the universe through thermal technology and then using it and applying it to military weapons. It's just like, seems to me, just a classic example of what's happening with this company. So I tried to work out what the proportions were between military and civil work, and I reckon it's about probably 75% civil and 25% military. But that doesn't mean to say that the specialist sections of Teledyne aren't focused exclusively on arms manufacturing. That's what they are doing. And I think various examples like the drones that have been mentioned shows in which direction they're moving. And I think it's very frightening in a way that, I have to say, it's almost macabre to say, but Palestine is being used as a research laboratory for a new generation of weapons. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And the drone technology is reaching a stage now where you can have a mini drone that's got its own explosive device and thermal imaging, so it can actually direct itself. At present, there are human sort of personnel making sure that they direct it, but the application of artificial intelligence means the technology is not far away when it would be an autonomous weapon. So we're not just doing it for the struggle of Palestine, we're doing it for the struggle of humanity. This is getting out of control. We are in an arms race that is out of control, and we've got to find some way of bringing it back into direct political control. And I think the point I'll make, the last point I'll make, is there are no economic or technical barriers to the transfer of resources from military to civil. It's absolutely clear. And Teledyne in its own way is an example of that, because it's got avionics that can be used in commercial flights, and it has thermal optics that can be used for health equipment. Those are the sorts of examples that you can use, and it relates back to the Lucas Aerospace experience. The only barrier is political. The only barrier to stopping this is political. If we had a political commitment to stop the arms trade and to implement some of the policies about arms conversion, we could literally transfer all those resources to civil work. We would employ more people, and it would have much more socially useful benefits for the whole of the international community. So that's why I still want to see conversion on the agenda. It may not be on the agenda with the present Labour government, but a lot of trade unions are campaigning hard for an alternative to this militarism that's going on. And I'm glad to try and represent that in public meetings like this. Thank you.
So, what do you think we can do to actually stop Teledyne?
One of the things I'd like to say, I think that direct action is absolutely vital in the whole process of bringing Teledyne to account. But one of the things that interests me is somebody who's worked with trade unions in the arms industries. is that you try and create a dialogue. When I went to Barrow, there were very few people who were willing to engage initially, because as far as they were concerned, Trident was going to be providing them with jobs for another 15, 20 years. You know, and this was at a time of massive recession in the economy. Shipbuilding industry has been decimated. And the government obviously played on that. And I think the image that sort of sticks in my mind was of one of the trade unions from the yard who became a good friend of mine. And he said they were economic conscripts in Thatcher's nuclear army. And that always struck me as the actual reality of it. That for too often there's very limited options for people. And I think Teledyne workers, some of them might not even know that they're actually working on armies. It might be that they're dual-use technology, maybe avionics, and they're being told it's for civil purposes. So that's an issue that might be worth thinking about. But they're not monsters, you know. These are family people who've probably taken their kids to Roberts Park, playing at the playground. Is there a possibility of engaging through the trade unions or directly with the workers and having a dialogue with people? Direct action is important, but I think there's a possibility. I mean, it takes a lot of work, and I can tell you it can be very frustrating work, because I've had to deal with quite a lot of flack in the past doing this sort of work. But there are people who are willing to respond, and it's the dialogue that can get you to the next stage, which is putting pressure politically on your local MPs. And you can say that you have that dialogue, and you try to make it work with you.
Perhaps that's something as BTOC can pick up at some point. We have spoken about engaging with employees, but perhaps that's an action that we can take forward. Sorry,
Hi Steve, thanks for the info. I don't agree with you though with Teledyne staff. They're actually very nasty lunch hour protesters and defending the women with great. They're actually proud of working with Nazis, Nazi IOF. They actually take pride in that. They know they're making weapons for a neo-Nazi regime. They know what the Israelis do with those weapons, and the Teledyne staff actually work literally hand in hand with the Israeli terrorist force when they install the weapons, they upgrade and maintain them. They're not innocent.
But I still think the problem for me is that I've seen this before, where you become so split between the possibility of an engagement and the reality of the experience that you've had from direct action, that you forget that there are other people who may be on the margins of the company, who might not be vocal, who might not be there, who are scared. They're scared that they're going to lose their jobs if this kicks off as a political project. So, for me, it's trying to find a balance between identifying what you're identifying, which is the complicity of the company, but also the possibility that other people in the company may be more receptive.
Communication.
Can I just take a quick question from Nadia?
Yeah, Steve, just to sort of come back to the idea of converting technology within the context of running capital. I think the major problem is we need to convert the society that facilitates, since like the 40s, like 285 wars that have taken place. War is a central product of capital. That's its business. Its business is killing people worldwide, and what Palestine has done has brought that to everybody's attention in real time. And we've got to ask ourselves why capital is prepared really to play and in our faces now. Because like you said, they're testing out weapons, but they're also testing out our response, right, to a psychopathic state, right, in control of Western capital, right, and to deal with, like taking that on as an ideological proposition and resisting it, right. We really have to be saying that we need to be controlling all aspects of social production and what we do, and all those aspects should really be dedicated towards our needs as human beings, not the needs of psychopathic, late-stage predatory capital and its projects. And really there's no, you know, like some people are going to lose the jobs, or they're going to have to decide not to do those jobs. Because you can't, the people in Teledyne, like, cannot say they don't know what they're doing in that factory. We've been there for 9 months. People have been there on the roofs. Now, we're not, you know, unless you're a complete idiot in that factory, right? And you know, say, why are these people here? Why are these police cars and the rest of it? You get the point. You get the point. It's not, you know. So, like, we need to really alter our approach and the ideas we're going to bring forward to challenge how we deal with capital.
Thanks, Thank you. Do you want to respond at all, or that was more of a statement, perhaps?
I have a response to
Yeah.
that. And I think the response that we all can show, and that the people at Teledyne could potentially show, is solidarity. It is a thing that, you know, we're always looking up at your Rishi Sunaks or the Benjamin Netanyahu of the world. We need to be looking around at each other. And I think that's one of the things that the trade union movement, especially groups like, for example, Workers for Free Palestine, have been blockading a lot of arms factories. They've been saying to the workers going in, we're workers, you're workers, the people you are bombing or contributing to bombing are workers. What are you doing? Because there really is a history in some of the arms factories in this country. You know, the Ney Passaran example where they refused to ship to Chile. You know, if we can find that strand of solidarity in ourselves and communicate it to others, I think that's a really powerful thing. And, you know, sometimes that means you've got to be in solidarity with people on top of a roof. And that is just as it is. But let's keep our eyes on the solidarity and less on trying to, if you like, you know, win a war or win a battle, because that's their game. It shouldn't be ours.
Yes.
Thank you.